Back to the line. We're back to a topic we've been talking about for some weeks now, but that's because there are always new developments. This past Monday, Albuquerque City Councilors approved allocating $250,000 to provide humanitarian support for asylum seekers who would be traveling through Albuquerque on their way to sponsors in other cities and states. The proposal passed in a 6-3 vote. The money could be used for a dedicated staff person to coordinate with local charities and help when their resources run low. Now, an argument was made that if getting these refugees to their final destination doesn't go smoothly, many could be left behind and absorbed into Albuquerque in our already large homeless population. Tom, and ICE and Border Patrol will send them to us whether we're prepared or not. So, I guess the question is coordinating efforts with these nonprofits and using this kind of money the appropriate way to go? If so, yes. If no, why?
Well, yes,
Okay.
is the short answer. There are a record number of border crossings. 1,000. It's up 1,800% from this time last year, according to Wall Street Journal.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, and it's the largest growth anywhere along the border. So, what are we going to do to help in that particular crisis? So I think allocating resources, being creative by opening up the state fairgrounds, those are very reasonable approaches to addressing the issue.
Laura, do you agree? Is this the best way to go? I'm guessing for you a little bit that it is, but is the how appropriate?
Well, I think it's an important start.
Okay.
I think there's going to be a lot more need, and the nonprofit sector is an important aspect to that as well. I think that there are individuals or people in the community that are willing to assist, but nonprofits have to be a part of that and have to be able to help organize an efficient way to get resources to these people.
Right.
I don't think it's fair necessarily to assume that if they aren't able to be transitioned to a different location that they're going to become homeless in the city. I think there's a lot of reasons for why people in Albuquerque end up homeless.
Right.
And it's a huge problem that has its own characteristics, much different from asylum seekers. So I think there's going to be some transition there, but it's fair to be concerned about it as well. And I think that's where a lot of our community leaders, especially people that are in these nonprofit organizations where they have the resources or they have the networks, they're going to be really important to the conversation. I hope that the city's coordinating with them.
Dan, I'm sure you've heard this. There's a question out there, from a lot of folks, and if we can suddenly come up with all this money instantly, how come we can't do this for our homeless population who have a need and they need support as well? Would you agree with that sentiment? And if so, what do we do about it?
We've had this unbelievable mental health and homeless problem in Albuquerque for years, and all of a sudden we've got asylum seekers coming in droves, and it's national news, and we're right at the forefront with $250,000 to fix it. But I think you got to slow down and take a look at it. I mean, the very first thing in the same press release is we're going to appropriate $250,000 to hire somebody to work with somebody. So I mean, it's just another bureaucrat move where at the end of the day, if you come in, if you watch this $250,000, very little of it's actually going to get to help anybody anywhere. It's going to hire somebody and a staff and people and pay rent, and you'll have one more talking head out there doing what it is they do instead of getting the money to the people.
Is your position that staff person is not necessary to
I think
make this
there's
work?
zero need for the staff person to get that out there. There's plenty of organizations, nonprofits that specialize in doing this stuff, whether it's churches, whether it's nonprofit organizations, non-denominational, that if you just went out and said, look, the money's available, go to, here's a way to get to access to that money, I think that you could get that $250,000 out on the streets and actually do some good with it. But you're going to find at the end of the day that there's going to be very little of that gets to the folks that need it. And at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with these asylum seekers anyway, with the Ninth Circuit Court ruling in favor of President Trump and saying that he can send these asylum seekers back to Mexico while they wait. What's going to happen now? I mean, are we going to have these individuals now? Because now all of a sudden with that decision, Mexico is now changing their opinion about having people come through the country because they're saying we can't handle hundreds of thousands of people left in Juarez and Tijuana and places along the border. So it's going to be interesting, but I'll bet you, regardless of what happens, the employee gets hired, the staff gets hired, the building gets rented, and we'll have someone out there doing it, spending $250,000.
Pick up on that, Michael. That seems like everything has a counterpoint. That seems reasonable, or is the need overriding some of the things that Dan's pointing out here?
I was raised to believe in quote unquote Christian charity, and that's an aspect, an element of all religious practices that we are supposed to help each others. And I think that everything needs to be looked at in context, and oftentimes historical context. the context for homelessness in Albuquerque, a big part of it, not just in Albuquerque, but in New Mexico, was the dismantling of the behavioral health system that existed by the previous administration. That put many people who had access to behavioral health, mental health services out in the street. And then coupled with another story is, of course, what we had going on with the police in Albuquerque, and which led to the consent decree. So it's very, some of these issues are, it's just not a soundbite. They're much more complex and nuanced, and that's just one element of it. We obviously, I think the city needs to have a plan, needs to define what the objective is, needs to come up with what they hope to achieve, and how will those resources be best utilized. To Dan's point, I think there are many ways to achieve your objective, and I think what needs to be developed, and I think hopefully is part of the discussion, is what is the best, what's our end, what are we attempting to achieve, and what's the best way to do that?
That seems reasonable. Sure, absolutely. Laura, I want to read your quote. Dan mentioned the national stuff about this. This week, the Washington Post reporting that the Trump administration has sent new guidelines to asylum officers directing them to, quote, take a more skeptical and confrontational approach during interviews with migrants seeking refuge in the United States. What is that supposed to accomplish? I'm confused why that is necessary. Do you have a sense of that?
I think it's a political move. I mean, I think it's an element that speaks to Trump's base, his supporters. I think it's the sort of thing that people who elected him, that support him, want to see him do, is taking a firmer approach. I have no doubt that they already asked some very specific questions of asylum seekers. There's already standards that have been in place for many, many years, for decades, about what gets asked. And I don't know that necessarily being more confrontational, that's troubling to me, is to say be more confrontational, because I don't know that that's going to be useful in any way. And ultimately, I think it's that sort of a policy directive really flies in the face of what we're supposed to be as a country here. And the whole idea that we're made up of immigrants. I mean, every one of us, with the exception of Michael, have a connection. And I don't know, you may have a connection, Michael. I don't want to assume anything, but almost every one of us has some,
That's right.
Immigrant ties. And so the idea that we're somehow going to be more confrontational with a segment of the population because of where they're regionally coming from is outrageous. And I think we need to be very concerned about the fundamental erosion of civil liberties when it comes to this, because again, civil liberties they're not specific to citizens. We, in our founding documents, say people. It doesn't say citizen, and so there's certain rights that they have from just being here at our borders. And I think we need to be consistent and not have a specific playbook because of regionally where these asylum seekers are coming from.
Good point there, Tom. Pick up on that if you would as well. Does that help further the getting to an answer with this problem, having this kind of directive out there,
It's a political approach, as has been discussed, on this show before. This is going to be a political issue for the next 2 years because you have both a president and a Congress that can't agree on immigration policy, and as a result, you're going to have this be front and center. I thought last week when Julianne Grimm was commenting on Santa Fe not jumping into to help the immigrants, I thought she brought up a great point on the whole issue of homelessness. In fact, that was the first time, excuse me, that I had heard that issue raised. Of course, this last week it was a major issue, but I thought that the Keller administration actually did a very good pivot on that from the perspective of saying, you know what, yes, it's the asylum seekers, but it's also an issue of homelessness, and so so they issued an RFP or whatever it is, a directive to spend $250,000. That is a step, but really addressing the issue of homelessness is very different, but sometimes gets lumped into this whole issue as far as, well, my gosh, how are we going to address all these issues?
Right. It's a tough one.